Damn, I was in that shit, man. I never had no dope like that before in my life, man. That's the heaviest shit I ever smoked, man. I mean, I smoked a lot of shit before, man. But goddamn, man, that's heavy shit. They tried to make me go to rehab. I said no, no, no.
129 people die every day in this country from a drug overdose.
I'm not afraid to take a stand.
Host Holly and various guests discuss the important topics about addiction and recovery. They are not quote-unquote experts, but just real people telling real stories. Any or no addictions are welcome. Recovery Talk starts now.
Hey, welcome to Recovery Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Holly. If you haven't already, give us a like on Facebook for updates and upcoming shows, and subscribe to us on Spreaker. We appreciate your support. It helps make the show possible. If you are interested in sharing your story, please message me at recoverytalkpodcast@gmail.com. I'm super excited to talk to our guest today. The 6'4", 270-pound center for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Randy Grimes, was a force on the field, but what fans couldn't see was this very secret battle he was fighting. The 10-year veteran of the NFL was addicted to pain pills that started with easing the pain to play, an addiction that lasted nearly 20 years. Grimes is now employed at a treatment center in Florida, devotes his time to helping families and addicts, including athletes, that are battling addiction, and by sharing his story.
Hey, how are you? I'm sorry about the delay. I couldn't get out of that session I was in.
Oh, not a problem. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
What's the weather like today?
Well, we still have some snow on the ground.
Oh, wow. That makes me feel better that I'm in Tampa then.
Yeah, I bet. Well,
thank you. What's going on? Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for thinking of me.
Yeah, thanks for taking a few minutes out of your busy schedule to chat.
Not a problem.
Could you tell us a little bit about your football career?
Yeah, you know what? I had a great career. I played, I'm from a small little East Texas town right outside of Dallas. And, you know, it was pickup trucks, Friday night lights, football and girls and pasture parties. I mean, that was my whole life back then. And, you know, everything revolved around that. And I was good enough to get an opportunity to play just about anywhere in what was then the Southwest Conference. But, you know, I chose Baylor University. I had a sister there. Being a good Southern Baptist that I was going to make sure I made my mama happy. And, you know, I went and played for the great Coach Grant Taft and had a great career at Baylor University. And, you know, I was just good enough to have scouts start looking at me my sophomore and junior year at Baylor. And, you know, still no history of substance abuse. I didn't have any in my family. My parents never drank in front of me. You know, I didn't see that there were some distant family members that had some substance abuse issues, but nothing, you know, directly in front of me with any of my family. And, you know, that carried on all the way through Baylor as well. And, you know, other than a couple of rowdy nights, you know, there was never any signs of substance abuse, alcohol abuse, anything like that. And, you know, I had a great career. Was fortunate enough to be drafted in the second round by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it was just a great opportunity. And you're talking about a kid that was raised in East Texas, never even seen the ocean, and was about to go to the seaside community of Tampa, Florida. It was a big deal. And, you know, they had just come off a playoff year the year before, so they were considered a playoff team. That playoff year was 1982. I was drafted in 83. I was their second-round pick. They didn't have a first-round pick, so I was their first player selected. They treated me like a first-round draft choice. And, you know, the rest is history. I had a great 10-year career there, but I also had a lot of ups and downs and hills and valleys and deep, dark places that I went to as a result of some of the things that I did while in Tampa.
Wow. And how did your drug use or your substance abuse from the painkillers start, or when did that happen?
Well, I was always that guy who, being a kid from East Texas, being a kid from a small Baptist school, college, talking about Baylor, I was always that guy that kept my mouth shut and I listened. And when I got to Tampa, after a couple of years, I kept my mouth shut and I listened to the older guys. I wanted to know how they were successful, what they did that kept them in the league. How were they able to turn what wasn't a sport anymore? It became a job. How were they able to do that for so long and to feed their families? And, one of the things the older guys taught me to do was do whatever you have to do to stay out on the field. And, in my case, that meant taking handfuls of painkillers because I knew that if I wasn't in my position, somebody else was going to be. And, they said, hey, Randy, you don't ever want to be that guy who's labeled an injury risk. You don't want to be that guy that's always in the training room. You don't want to be that guy that the doctor's always coming looking for because you got an appointment, because if you get that label, you never lose it. And I was never going to get that label. I was going to, it's kind of like that warrior mentality that especially boys are raised with. And, it comes from our fathers and it came from their fathers, and it's not their fault. It's just the way that we were raised, and we suffer in silence. We pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and we get back on the field. Big boys don't cry, all that mentality. That's that warrior mentality that we're raised with. And, right or wrong, that's pretty much how we go about our life. And, I justified it so many different ways. I thought, okay, I'm getting these pain pills from an NFL doctor, so it must be okay, right? Or the older guys have been doing this for decades, so it must be okay, right? It must just be part of the culture, right? Or, I justified it because, hey, I wanted to feed my family. I wanted to be the best center that ever played the game. I wanted to play the game for as long as I could. Those are the ways that I justified it. And, it progressed to the point to where the last 2 years of my career, I played 10 years, but the last 2 years of my career, I played in a complete blackout. I was taking so many benzos along with the opiates that before games that I was just, I would be home at night laying on a couch. I'd be cut up, scratched, bruised, dehydrated, everything that you are after an NFL football game. And this would be 6 or 7 hours after the game before I would start coming to. And I couldn't remember a single bit of it. And I would have to wait till the next morning and watch it on film with everybody else to see how I played. And, I always played great. And that just kept the chaos going for a whole nother week. And, that's something I've only just recently started talking about because I feel so fortunate that God blessed me with the opportunity to be in the right place at the right time in front of the right people. And, the last 2 years of the greatest gift anyone could give me, I played in a complete blackout. Mm-hmm. But that's the progression of this disease, and that was the progression of mine. And, what I never counted on doing was taking that full-blown addiction into my retired life, and that's when things really got out of control. I mean, when I didn't have all those enablers around me, those team doctors, team trainers, teammates, fans, when I didn't have those guys, then that's when all the chaos of doctor shopping and multiple pharmacies and keeping my addiction going, because not only was the chronic pain just getting worse, so was my tolerance. And it just became a disease about more and more and more. And then when I didn't have the game anymore, you know, it wasn't so much the pressure of playing because I wasn't in the game anymore. Then it was all about lack of identity. And, you know, I lost all my self-esteem when I wasn't Randy Grimes, the football player, anymore.
When did you decide to get help?
That's the crazy part, you know, because I probably suffered another 20 years just trying to pull this thing together, always thinking that I was in control, you know. And of course, I was never in control. And, you know, this went on for another 20 years. And, you know, there was periods in there where I guess things were halfway manageable. I was able to hold on to jobs maybe for a few years and function and work. But, you know, it always went back to, it always got 10 times worse than it ever was before.
And you started an organization called Athletes in Recovery?
Yes.
How'd that get started?
Well, you know, I came into treatment, you know, on September 22nd of 2009. And, you know, I flew into Fort Lauderdale from Houston, Texas, and I was so sick. And I remember driving up from Fort Lauderdale to West Palm Beach where the treatment center was at, and I just fell out of the car. And I crawled in on all fours. I was so desperate. I was so sick. And, you know, I remember, the only thing I remember about that night, other than crawling through that doorway, was I remember hearing somebody say, Randy, in order to get this, you've got to have the desperation of a drowning man. And, you know, I didn't know anything about recovery at the time. I just knew that as a young boy, I nearly drowned. I was 8 years old, and I can remember the desperation I had to claw myself back to the top of that water. And I was trapped under this paddle boat thing. And I remember how desperate I was to get back to the top. So I knew after hearing that, it just really impacted me that, you know, I was into the fight of my life. And you know, I've always considered myself a pretty tough guy. You know, I've been in a lot of battles, and I've won most of those battles. You don't get to stay in the NFL for 10 years unless you win in most of those battles. But I got to tell you, man, going into treatment was the scariest thing that I've ever done, but it was also the most rewarding thing. You know, it's by far my greatest accomplishment because it was the fear that I had to overcome. Because, you know, I convinced myself that I was that one that needed opiates for the rest of my life. You know, I had injuries. I had legitimate chronic pain that I needed benzos for the rest of my life. That I was no way that I could sleep through these throbbing headaches and throbbing joint pains without some benzos, without help. So I convinced myself, and I didn't see how I could live without opiates and benzos. So it was scary to know that I had to give those things up, those things that I had relied on for so long, even though they had caused so much pain and destruction and cost me so many jobs and houses and cars and relationships, you know. I never saw myself not using them. I was scared to death to not have them. So,
wow.
I mean, I've stayed in treatment for 90 days, but, you know, I knew that I wanted to do something. One of the things that got me to go to treatment was the death of a friend of mine named Tom McHale. And he was a guy that I played with in Tampa. I played right next to him on the offensive line. He was a great friend, and he was doing the same thing that I was doing. He was self-medicating his chronic pain with benzos and opiates. And one morning, he just didn't wake up. And I knew that there was a lot of other guys out there like me and Tom. And I wanted to do something to help those guys that not only I played with, the guys that I played against. And that's when I started this organization, Athletes in Recovery. I started working with the NFL, the Care Foundation, with BAT. baseball assistance team. I wanted to help former Major League Baseball players as well. And over the last 7.5 years, 8 years, we've been able to help hundreds and hundreds of guys, former players that, guys that leaving the game with chronic pain, and they're self-medicating because, like I said, it's that warrior mentality where we suffer in silence and we do what we have to do to get through each day. And, I'm real proud of the work that we've done and the guys that we've been able to help and the guys that they've been able to help through their experience.
Mm-hmm. It kind of goes with the whole man up, be a man.
Right.
What advice do you give to the newer athletes to avoid going down the road of addiction?
Well, I think there's a lot more accountability now. I think there's more policy and procedure in place than back when I was in the league. Back when I was in the league, it was a wild, wild west. We had team doctors and team trainers that were handing out anything that you wanted, and even if they didn't, we had open drug safes, so you could just go get what you wanted. And but I think now that the NFL has made, matter of fact, we were just talking about it at this conference about that. I think the NFL and the NCAA have making doctors be more accountable, making trainers be more accountable for the narcotics that they prescribe, which is a great thing. And, I think a lot of things have changed that players really, unless they're going outside the team, going to doctors outside, if they're doctor shopping and multiple pharmacies and all that thing, that's really the only way they can fall into the trap that I did. It's not as easy anymore to do it through the team like what happened to me. So, my advice is, you can play through those injuries. There's non-narcotic ways to deal with that chronic pain. And we know how it ends. We know if you do go down that route, we know how it ends. People lose jobs, people get hurt, people die.
Yeah, and I think of the whole opiate epidemic, it's, people know more about it now.
Yes.
They're more aware.
Well, they're more aware, but do they really know what to do about it? I mean, do they know the resources available? Do they know how to ask for help or who to ask for help? Do they know the signs to be looking for? And I'm really talking about families now. Have they overcome the stigma that's associated with being or having a substance abuse issue? Those are the things we battle every day, and we try to educate people on, because until we break down those barriers, then people will continue to bury their head in the sand and either think that the problem will go away on its own, or that they can love somebody back to health, or that if they just don't recognize it, then it's not really there.
Yeah, there's a lot more work to be done.
Yes.
So, Randy, what does a normal day look like for you?
Well, I work for Transformations Treatment Center, and as business development and strategy, I don't just deal with athletes. I deal with everybody that's having substance abuse issues, and my real passion is obviously athletes and young people, but I also know that this affects everybody, and I love dealing with families, because I really believe that when families get well, addicts get well. And I love working with families and teaching them boundaries and educating them on this disease. It's a big challenge just convincing them that it's a disease.
Yeah, and it's especially hard for families to understand, being such a complex disease. Well, that's about all I have. Thank you so much for the interview, Randy, and especially all the work that you're doing that's changing lives. We can always use our experience to help the next person heal.
We can only keep it by giving it away, right?
That's right. Keep coming back.
Keep coming back. Well, I do. I appreciate the opportunity to be on the show, and I'd love for you to send me this when you're done with it, and let's stay in touch.
Sounds great. We'll do that. I'll talk to you soon then.
Thank you, Holly, very much.
Thanks, Randy. Have a great day.
All right. Bye-bye.
What an awesome, cool guy with an incredible story. And for today's reading is out of the Book of Awakening. Our essential clearness, like clouds moving in water, problems make me forget I'm clear. Water reflects everything it encounters. This is so commonplace that we think water is blue, when in fact it has no color. Amazingly, while soft and flowing, water as an ocean or lake, or even as the smallest puddle of rain, takes on the image of the entire world without ever losing its essential clearness. Of course, it is not easy for us. As emotional beings, we are constantly losing ourselves in the image of everything we experience. But nothing less, the nature of water can help us understand our very human struggles. I began, like so many of us, in a household where it was somehow my job to be the lightning rod for the family's tensions of unexpressed emotion. In this way, I learned to be a problem solver, a rescuer, a caretaker. Through 2 marriages and countless friendships, I loved by taking on the clouded emotions of those I loved. The tension of other people's unexpressed emotions kept me from feeling my own depth and clarity. My life became one turbulence, always struggling to keep my head above the cloudy surface. But the water, the glorious water everywhere, has taught me that we are more than what we reflect or love. This is the work of compassion, to embrace everything clearly without imposing who we are and without losing who we are. It is, to be true, an endless and impossible task. But though we can never be as clear as water, it helps us to remember that while the very real problems we face are the living things we must handle, they are not the essential current of our lives. Beneath the clouds, water desires only to flow, and beneath our tensions and problems, the human spirit wants only to embrace and soften. And then after the reading it says, the next time a loved one voices frustration, disappointment, or pain, notice your reaction. Are you problem solving or accepting what they are saying? Are you trying to cheer them up or bear witness to their experience? Are you left holding their pain or deepened for what is shared? If you can, receive this pain as if it were a stone dropped into the clear, moving depth of who you are. That was a good reading, especially what Randy was saying earlier about being a rescuer and a caretaker. That we need to have feelings and be able to feel them and not carry everybody else's load and problems. Not my circus, not my monkeys. That's a saying that I like. I got that saying from a good friend. Then I'll go ahead and I'll read the riddle I have for today. Marijuana is the gateway drug to taking 45 minutes to pick out which color Gatorade you want to buy. I have that problem without the marijuana, but I do like the purple one. The purple one is my favorite. Thanks, guys, for listening to Recovery Talk Podcast. If you like the podcast, please share with your friends and like us on Facebook. We'll have a new episode out June 1st. Thanks for listening.